It's been a great few days for Atlanta sports fans. The Patriots lost, the Saints choked, and the Atlanta Hawks won an actual NBA basketball game. On top of that, Adrian Wojnarowski is reporting that the Hawks are in trade talks for Pistons All-Star center Andre Drummond. Now, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation, and a lot of very divided opinions flying around about this potential trade right now. So I want to take an objective look at Drummond as a player and as a fit with the Hawks organization, both in the short and long term, and figure out what this trade could mean for the future of this team. So let's start from the beginning. What would a trade for Andre Drummond most likely look like for the Atlanta Hawks? Now, we have to start with salary matching. Simplest way to do that is to just send Chandler Parsons over. There you go. Pistons get some cap relief when they lose Parsons off the expiring next year. They get to go into their rebuild, which they seem to be gearing up for, with a lot of space. Now, the other possible scenario is Evan Turner and some kind of filler. I think the most likely options there are a Jabari Parker, which works, or you throw in an Alex Lynn to send a center back to the Pistons. I would imagine that if Detroit wants another center packaged in, they'd be more likely to ask for a Bruno Fernando, who's a young guy, a lot of room to improve, would fit their new timeline. But if it's just Fernando and Turner, the salary doesn't work out, so that maybe only works if you throw Jabari Parker in there as well. Now, the other component here is draft picks, and what I see as the best case scenario for the Hawks is that they send a Chandler Parsons or Evan Turner plus filler along with the Nets pick that they currently own for this year. It is lottery protected, but it doesn't look like the Nets are going to be a lottery team, especially not in the East. So we can safely assume that we could send that along and bring Drummond in. Now, it's possible that the Pistons want more than that. Another scenario I could see is that we do the Hawks' own pick with some kind of protections, maybe top 10, top 8, along with that salary filler. Or, worst case, they also ask for some of our legitimate young talent, like a Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, maybe a Cam Reddish. In that case, I don't think the Hawks should make this trade, and I don't think they will send any of those guys away. Frankly, I think the Nets pick plus salary is the most likely scenario. But we have to assume that the Hawks' own pick is in play as well, just with some kind of protection. But just because you can comfortably trade for an all-star doesn't mean you necessarily should. So how does Drummond fit in with the Hawks and their future? Now, I think there's two components to this. One, does he address an immediate need? And two, how does he fit with our timeline and our goal of winning a championship in the next decade? The first part is easy. He absolutely fits an immediate need. The Hawks are tied for dead last in the NBA in rebounds per game at 42.2. Drummond leads the NBA in individual rebounds per game at 15.5, and his per 100, as you can see here, is 22.9, also the best in the league. Immediately helps us get some extra possessions, hopefully put up a few more points, hopefully give up a few fewer points, and that's another component here is that our defense is just awful. They're 27th in the league in defensive rating and adjusted defensive rating. Meanwhile, Andre Drummond is 28th total out of 477 players listed on basketballreference.com. If you throw out players with under 100 minutes played, and as you can see, there's a lot of guys with just too small of a sample size here, he jumps up to 15th total. That also puts him at 10th among centers. So is he an absolute lockdown guy? No. But he's better than anybody we have playing defense right now, at least in our interior. I think you put Drummond on this team just by virtue of having the ball more, you're not going to see so many blowouts. The issue, however, with Drummond's fit, both in the short and long term, comes on offense, and this is where I see a real problem. Drummond is not a shooter. Not at all. Now, at first I was thinking, okay, Dwayne Dedmon, guy that the Hawks brought in 2 years ago, not a shooter before he came to Atlanta, had attempted one three-pointer in his career, came in and shot 35 and 38% in his 2 years here. Pretty good. Maybe Drummond can make a similar leap, right? Then I looked at his stats in detail, and that's not going to happen. Not just because of the three-point percentage, which, like I said, changed for Dedmon, could change for somebody else, right? No. Terrible terrible, terrible free throw shooter. We know that. Everybody knows that. He's gotten better, as you can see. There's a definite positive trend here, which is great. But at this stage in his career, and I know he's only 26, but he's been in the league since 2012, you can't just expect the guy to turn into a real shooter and a legitimate threat to space the floor. And that, I think, is a real problem when you talk about putting this guy on the Hawks. We are built around shooters. Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, Cam Reddish hasn't been shooting great yet, but the hope is he will. DeAndre Hunter, going to be a good shooter. John Collins, shooting better. He's got the look of a guy who's a potential real stretch 4 threat in the future. And to some extent, that's fine. If you just want him to come in here and get 15 rebounds a game, which is a lot of rebounds. Don't get me wrong. That's crazy. That's a great stat. If you want him to get 15 rebounds a game, you want him to play a better defense than any of your other current big men, he can do that, but I don't think we bring him in to be even a third option scoring. I think the hope here, if Drummond is theoretically part of future plans, is that your first option is Trae Young, of course. Your second option is John Collins, and if it's not John Collins, then it's one of that wing trio of Huerter, Hunter, Reddish, and then John Collins comes in third. I don't really see a world in the modern NBA where a championship team is asking Drummond to be a number 2 scorer. But the thing is, you're going to have to pay him a lot of money. And are you comfortable paying that kind of money to a guy who's not even a second or third option in your future offense? The money in the long-term contract is really going to be the crux of the argument here. You're not going to give up legitimate assets for a guy that you think is just going to walk after this half of a season, right? Because we're not championship contenders right now. That would be very, very foolish to just throw assets away. You're only bringing Drummond in if you think you can sign him on a long-term extension. And with his bird rights, you could sign him for another 5 years. But that's probably going to be upwards of $30 million a year. The thing is, though, that $30 million isn't exactly crippling. And I know that sounds insane, but to understand this, you need to look at the cap situation that the Hawks have coming up here. Now, the Hawks' upcoming cap situation is just a GM's dream. With this year's cap sitting at $109 million, that'll probably go up to $111, $112 next year. With only $33 million currently signed for next year, we have nearly $80 million in cap space. That is ridiculous. So if you're the Hawks and you're trying to use all of this money to go out and win a championship, how do you do that? Ideally, we just, sign all of the superstar free agents. That would be great. But unfortunately, that's just never been done by the Hawks before. We're not, for whatever reason, a big-time free agent destination. So if we want to be a place where stars will come and where the kind of quality veteran role player free agents that you need to round out a roster will come, we have to show that we can compete with the guys that we have long-term. And those are the guys who we have bird rights for, who we can sign major extensions for while going over the salary cap. That's Trae Young. That's John Collins. We hope that there's another guy from the last couple of drafts or the next few upcoming drafts who fit there. But other than that, we're going to have to go trade for somebody who's established, who's a known name, who we can put on this roster, go compete, not make a deep run, just make some noise in the playoffs and show the world that, hey, you can come to Atlanta and you can be the guy that puts this team over the top. Now, as skeptical as I am of Drummond's offensive fit here, if he can come in and just average 15 to 17 points a game, continue to get 15 rebounds a game, and make us a little less terrible on defense, he could be the guy that legitimizes us for other free agents. And like I said, look at all this money. We're going to be able to extend our guys, extend Drummond, and still have some room to fill out the roster. It's really not crippling to spend $30 million on him right now. It certainly limits our flexibility, and there are plenty of guys I would rather spend that money on, but I don't know if any of them are attainable. We may have to just go get the best guy we can get, and that may be Andre Drummond. So, do I think Andre Drummond makes the Hawks a championship team in the next 5 years? Not by himself, but I do think he can be an important piece on a championship contender. And I think the legitimacy factor that a trade like this brings to our competitive intentions is probably more important than that. The reality is, if we're close over the next 5 years, his deal will run out in 2025, assuming that he signs a 5 year contract starting in 2020. And that'll be before we hit third contracts for John Collins and Trae Young, which means if we can build competitive legitimacy over the next 5 years with Andre Drummond, with Trae Young, John Collins, our other young guys, we'll have the money to go out and get a legitimate superstar in 2025. And I know that sounds like a really long way away, but if we're just close before then, if we're a top 4 seed in the East consistently from 2023 to 2025, then I think the trade was worth it. I might not be excited about the prospect of trading for Andre Drummond, but I kind of think it's a good idea. But hey, we don't know yet what will happen. The trade might not happen at all, or maybe it does do irreparable damage to this franchise, in which case, bookmark this video, come back and tell me in 3 years how wrong I was. I'll take my lumps on that one. If you enjoyed this discussion, be sure to leave a like, and if you're interested in more Atlanta sports content, over the next couple weeks I'll have off-season catch-ups for Atlanta United and the Atlanta Braves, as well as a season wrap-up for the Falcons. Be sure to hit subscribe, come back and check it out. It's going to be a good spring. A lot to look forward to in 2020 for Atlanta sports. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you around Atlanta.